All right. Hey, everyone. I'm here with Lynne Hill Clark, the author of the of Lords and Commoners series. Great series. I read book one. Plan on reading book two and three, and author of High Concept Fantasy. And I would definitely agree with that title. Excellent writing, excellent concepts. Characterization was great, and of Lord and Commoners, which holds the name of the series. And there was a lot that Lynne did in her books that I appreciated as a fellow author, with her style of writing and characterization, and just being an overall wordsmith was pretty awesome. And I'm a history teacher too, so the historical aspects of Lord and Commoners was really cool, because I just love it when authors take stories and history and concepts like monsters or vampires or whatever the case may be, and just put a different spin on them, and at the same time get stuff historically accurate. When people don't do the history right, it's always a bummer. So anyways, so Lynne, when did you first realize you wanted to be a writer slash author?
Okay. All right. Well, a little bit of a late bloomer, probably. As far, a lot of people say, "Oh, I knew I wanted to write from early on," but there was a reason why I didn't. I'll get to that. But I remember it was January 2015 was when I started writing my of Lords and Commoners, book one, page one, chapter one. And when I started writing, probably that first page, I realized I pretty much haven't stopped since. So pretty much been writing full time since then, and it's all that I want to do. I think the reason why I didn't get started sooner in writing earlier on was because I don't know what this is lately. I've been running across a lot of authors who were dyslexic. They say they were dyslexic, and it was definitely a milestone that we had to get over. In second grade, I was diagnosed with dyslexia, and this was
Oh, okay.
way back before they knew much about it. And so they told my parents that there was no way I would graduate high school. I essentially had the IQ of someone with Down syndrome. And
Wow.
so they told my parents that, prepare me for manual labor jobs. They were like, maybe she could be a maid or something. So I had some amazing teachers, amazing support from my parents. And by fourth grade, I was top of my class, and it was a position that I wasn't willing to give up. So I'm glad I had that attitude that's basically, if you want me to do something, tell me that I can't do it. So thankfully, yay,
Yeah.
I persevered. And so I currently hold my PhD in criminology and justice studies. So yeah, but I think, so I wrote, my master's thesis was essentially the size of a novella, and then my PhD dissertation was the size of a novel. And so after completing my PhD, I realized, wait, I actually maybe could write a novel length story. So that was when I first started maybe even thinking about it,
Okay.
playing around with some ideas. And then when I actually started writing, then it was like, yeah, I've never looked back since. So
That's awesome. So you're diagnosed with dyslexia.
mhm.
Uh, People potentially think you won't even graduate high school, and
Yes,
now you have a PhD.
right,
Yeah,
right.
that's pretty cool.
And then
So
I ran into so many authors. I thought I was unique, but I don't know. Maybe it gives way to creativity. Maybe we're good storytellers. I don't know. But there's so many people more recently in my life that I'm like, they're saying, "Oh, I'm dyslexic too." I'm like, really?
yeah, yeah.
So,
Well, and I would think, I would hope that nowadays there's so many more avenues to get your thoughts on paper.
yeah.
Right. And
And I hope, and we know so much more about dyslexia now,
right.
but it's not. I hope that kids aren't told that today. Like they just didn't know back
Right.
then.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not as detrimental as they once thought it was.
Right. That's awesome. So, if I can ask, what were you doing before you started writing? Uh,
Ah, okay.
yeah.
Mostly in school, a lot of schooling, and I worked mostly for nonprofits,
Okay.
which I loved. That was great. So
Cool.
yeah.
So, high concept fantasy, and I mean, obviously, having read your work, I can attest to the fact that it's definitely fantasy, and some historical fiction in there as well. Well, not some; it is historical fiction. So, why fantasy? Why history? Why the two combined? What motivated you to write in that genre?
Oh, okay. So I usually always start with a what if statement. A lot of high concept fantasy does start with a what if statement. So I wanted to tell a different story. I feel like so many vampire stories had been told from the perspective of a human coming in contact with this creepy
Mhm.
old character. And so I wanted to tell the vampire story. So that was number one. And then my what if statement was, what if the good guys were in charge? What would
Mhm.
that look like? What would they have to do to maintain control? Um, and so it was difficult because so many stories I felt were told from the bottom up. They're a hero. It's, Luke Skywalker against the Empire. It's Robin Hood against the British government, whatever, monarchy. So I wanted to tell a completely reverse story on both those cases, and there's some problem. It was harder. I kind of see why stories are often told the way they are.
Sure.
It's a learning curve. So for my current one, the what if statement is, what if women were in control? And so that comes from um, my time spent in the Middle East. I was in the Peace Corps volunteer in Jordan in the Middle
Okay.
East. I lived in a small village for over a year there. So very, very conservative village and very old fashioned. And so I took like, what would those gender roles look like reversed? And so
Okay.
that's my what if concept for the series that I'm currently writing. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a concept that's very applicable to today when we start looking at social issues that are happening now and recently, and
Mhm.
role reversal, and the other thing that I really like, that you explore, one of the goals of my own writing is to explore the relativity of good and bad, right?
Mm,
Uh,
mm,
that,
yeah.
from one person's perspective, this person is bad, but from another person's perspective, they're a hero. And
Mhm.
so I thought that really came out in your writing.
Mm,
And
cool.
yeah, cool, very good. So how do you? I mean, I think maybe you already kind of alluded to it a little bit, but how do you come up with your ideas for your stories?
Right. So I've been accused of having an agenda. They say sometimes.
Okay. That's not a bad thing, I don't think.
Yeah, yeah, it's not. You have to write what you're passionate about. So yeah, I'm not going to change that. But yeah, so it's social issues, environmental issues, um, religious issues, even a little bit come up. Yeah, so that's definitely motivation. My travels, definitely. My education overall. So just, my husband's like, but you're not using your degree. I'm like, I am.
Mhm.
Actually, I'm pulling from all these disciplines and, history, which I love. Um, yeah, so I am kind of using it, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Cool. Well, I think probably one of the biggest questions that a lot of burgeoning authors have is, how do I sit down and write?
Mm,
So, and I don't know about you, but for me, that it was a struggle, and even sometimes still is a struggle. So, what does your writing process look like? Like your day, your week? How do you plan your books? You mentioned you start with a what if statement, which is awesome, and I might have to steal that. I don't know, but yeah. So, what does your writing process look like?
right. Okay. So I have to kind of divert to Dan Brown, one of my favorite authors of all times. He's simply amazing. Above my desk here, I have a quote from him, and it says, "Protect the writing process, and the results will follow." So he really says, you've got to have a set time that you put your butt in that chair and you're working, you're writing. So my day usually I try to do 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. at least. And if I'm in the middle of a scene or something, it'll go longer than that. But at least I try to do 8 to 3 every day, and I try to postpone stuff, the rest of reality and life, to outside those hours. That's 5 days a week. So it helps to have a schedule, to force yourself to get in that chair. And Dan Brown says, when you call yourself an author or a writer, until you're not willing to do that anymore, until you're not willing to sit down and write, and then you're no longer a writer. But as long as you are willing to write, then call yourself a writer. Tell people you're a writer. So yeah, it's definitely hard. And the editing, I could write a draft of a novel relatively quickly. It's the editing that takes longer, especially being dyslexic. Yeah, so it's less writing sometimes than you'd like. It's a lot of editing and marketing also in that time period. So
Definitely. And then when it comes to, and I'll use the term plotters versus pantsers. It's a very popular term these days with among the writing community. Are you a plotter? So are you someone who sits down and kind of outlines your books, or are you a pantser? So for those of you that are watching that don't know what a pantser is, that's someone who just kind of sits down and writes.
hmm.
Which category do you think you fall into a little bit more?
For the first book, definitely a pantser. I had very little creative writing knowledge or experience for that first draft of the first book. I had to learn a lot. um, but yeah, for the first book, definitely a pantser. As I right now, I'm just about to finish up my fifth novel, and more plot, definitely more of a plotter now. It's kind of, I usually at least have an idea of the ending. I know how it's going to end. I definitely plot out some of the main twists. You know, this character is good, and the red herrings and some of the twists. I definitely do that. The details of how I'm going to get these characters from A to B, no. Dan Brown had 100-page outline for the Da Vinci Code.
Wow.
I have like not even a page.
It-
So I'm not as much of a plotter as he is. Of course, his plots are incredibly complex and
right.
over the top. So I think it's whatever works for you. Oh, this is a bit of advice for this fellow author friend of mine. Went to his first conference and he's like, I'm going to be a writer. He gave up being a lawyer. He's like, I'm going to be a writer. He goes to the conference and the first speaker stands up and says, always plot. If you don't plot, your story's going to fall apart. It's going to be horrible. You have to plot out every chapter, you know. And the next speaker got up and said, never plot. It kills creativity.
Yeah. Which one, right?
So which one? You know, it's really up to the individual writer and what works for them.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly. What works for you works for you. So
Right. Right.
um so what and again, this you might have already answered some of this, but what keeps you motivated to write? I mean, again, for those that are watching, as an author or a writer, we go through these ups and downs like any job, probably these lulls of motivation. So
Mhm.
what do you use to keep yourself motivated?
The excitement of writing, and especially when I know when I'm on the right path because I'm super excited about the story and what's happening in the story. So that is worth it right there. Like I've said, there's nothing I would rather do but write. So that helps. I mean, that helps me to be motivated to have my butt in the chair at 8 a.m. every morning to get my writing in. So yeah, I love the process. I love what I do. So.
Awesome. And then it sounds like they were, but has your family always been pretty supportive of your goal to be a writer? And,
Yes. Well, my mom and my dad, of course, you know, the cliche, they're my biggest fans for sure. So yeah, my mom and dad are like, oh yeah, you have to do it. You have to keep going. You have to make this work. My husband shakes his head. He's just like, really? He doesn't understand all the time. It takes a lot of time to get a writing career off the ground and get going. And he says, I don't understand. I go to work and I get paid and you
yeah,
go to work and you don't get paid yet. um, so yeah, it's hard. But yes, for the most part, for sure.
well, and then you are pretty much full time, right? In terms of writing right now, yeah, awesome. So congratulations on that. First of all, that's amazing. What were some obstacles other than dealing with your dyslexia? What were some obstacles that you had to overcome in order to be able to go full time and set up that schedule that you have, and just be able to be a full time author?
It was a huge leap of faith to give up my part-time job. So I was teaching master's level students statistics, which the students hated. Ironically, as being dyslexic, I've always liked math too. Apparently, I like all fields of academia. But anyway, it was one class, never more than two. So it paid a bill. So I don't know why I hung on to it for as long as I did. I did that for about 6 years. It was like, why am I doing this? Um, when it never, I would apply for a full-time job and that would never come through online. So but still, even giving up that little piddly job, even though it wasn't paying all the bills, it was only paying one, that was hard, because it was like, oh, what if, this doesn't work? So I just finally said, you know what, I have enough faith. I'm focusing all my energy and effort into writing, because that's really what I want to do.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then I guess, well, not necessarily finally, but there's a lot of people that would look at, someone like yourself who has made that jump to full time, just because I know you. For anyone out there listening, we're friends, and so I know that you've started, actually gotten to that critical moment where you start actually making money. You look on your dashboard with whatever system we're using, and you see money coming in, and that's super exciting.
Right.
Um, so a lot of people out there who want to be writers are going to ask, what advice do these people have for me? Or what nuggets of information? What advice would you have for someone who is thinking about writing, and this is something that maybe they want to do full time?
Right. Well, two things come to mind actually. The first one was you have to believe in yourself. I know that people might get tired of hearing that, but you have to believe that there is an audience for your book out there. I believe there's an audience for every book out there. You have to believe that it's worth reading, that you're going to find that audience. So I get a lot of authors on either end of the spectrum here. They say, oh, I have this book, but I don't know who would want to read it. So
Right.
no one's going to, you have to first believe in yourself before you're going to be able to find that audience and know that, yes, this book is good enough. There is an audience for this book, and I got to get it out there. And then me, when I first started, so excited with my first book, I was like, oh, this book is for everybody. And then, I even had friends who were avid readers, and they were like, but I don't read vampires. So like, I'm not going to read that. I'm like, but I wrote, but it's for everybody. You'll love it.
Right.
No, your book is not for everybody.
Right.
And so that was a lesson that I had to learn with my first book. And so now I really am just focused on my audience, people who will like to read more high concept fantasy rather than fiction that's more based in a a modern world,
Sure.
normal. So yeah, those either end of the whichever one you're on, know that yes, either you've got to believe in yourself, or you've got to know that your book's not for everyone.
So it's really interesting that you brought that up, because I really feel like your books, the Lords and Commoners series, do a really good job of transcending genres, right? So you have historical fiction, you have, I don't know vampire fiction, you have fantasy, and so like me personally, I tried reading like the Twilight books,
Mm-hmm.
and just wasn't my gig, wasn't for me. And kind of like you said, not every book is for every person, but I enjoyed yours. And so why do you what I don't know, what is it about your writing style or you that allowed you to transcend those genres, do you think?
Gosh, I don't know. My first reaction was probably all my education in different kind of disciplines, as far as even the statistics to history to I did a ton of research on my own for my first two novels of history. Transcending academic disciplines as well,
Yeah.
to kind of cover a lot of bases. Yeah, cross
Nice.
genre.
And then kind of a second little question to what you had said, in terms of not every book is for every person. And this just popped in my head. How do you deal with negative reviews? Because and let's kind of clarify again for people that are watching this. I mean, there's those negative reviews that I think both Lynn and I have gotten that are just mean, and they have no value whatsoever, right? I mean, they're just like, someone's just being a jerk. But how do you deal with those negative reviews that are from people that they either don't get what you're writing, they don't get the concept, they don't like your writing style? How do you deal with that?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I don't read my reviews anymore. I just
Ditto. I'm with you.
look at my overall score, and I'm like, yes, still up. Yay.
Yeah, yeah.
My overall star score is good. I'm good with that. But yes, in the beginning, I definitely did read the reviews. Um, not take them personally. That's number one. Even though some of them are personal attacks, like you said, they're just being jerks. The hardest thing though is to figure out if there's good advice in there. If there's because we all have room for improvement. I had 50 drafts of my first book at least, and
Right.
they needed it. My first draft was horrible, horrible. Everybody's first draft of their first book is horrible. The first draft of my second book, sucked a little less, but I still had a lot of work to do on it before I could publish it. And I've come out with editions, second editions since then. So even the first editions that I did publish weren't quite good enough. And I could probably come out with another edition. I'm not going to. But there's always room for improvement. So you have to try to pick, is there something I need to improve on here? Is there some good advice here? Or are they just being mean?
Right.
And there's no value, like you said. So learning that difference. And I think as a new writer, I had to listen. I had another family member super, super supportive of me. And she, in a highly critical way, she really criticized my work. Like my mom's like, oh, it's great, honey. Anything I did she was going to say my first draft, and it was horrible. Right.
Right.
And she, this person said, this is horrible. You've got a long ways to go. You needed it. And I learned, I'm like, great. I needed that feedback. I needed that criticism because she said it's not good and here's why, right? She helped me
Right.
to improve. So if you can get someone who is going to really be critical in a constructive way, that's awesome, especially in the beginning. Like I really needed that. But now after a fifth book, I'm like, I don't care. I'm going to write what I write. I'm going to write how I write. And I don't care if somebody doesn't like it.
Totally. Yep. Well, as we finish up, firstly, thank you, Lynne.
You.
Awesome. And what questions would you have for your readers? Do you have any questions for your own readers?
I do actually. Yeah, I always struggle with the endings of books. I feel like, so my question is to my readers, I would like to know, do you prefer happily ever after or tragedies? I sometimes feel like a tragedy is much more realistic or probable, especially in these situations that I get my characters in. But I have a feeling I need to conduct more research on this. It'll be part of it, a survey here of who likes the happy endings and who likes tragedies, because I think maybe one theory is that readers read, especially fantasy, to escape reality. And so, there's enough death and stuff in reality. So they want to escape that, and they want that happily ever after. They want the good guys to win, even though I feel like sometimes that's so predictable.
Right.
So yeah, so that would be my question to my reader: happily ever after or tragedies?
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, for anyone watching, I will put a link to Lynne's website in the bio. And so you can click the little down arrow and open that up. And I would encourage you to, contact her and let her know what you think, because I know as readers, obviously, like she said, we're going to write what we write, but we also have an audience that we recognize, and it's always a good learning tool. So, All right. Well, Lynne Hill Clark, PhD, high concept fantasy author, amazing person. And so thank you very much for taking the time to let me interview you about your books. And I look forward to reading books 2 and 3 of Lords and Commoners. And I definitely look forward to your next series that's coming out. Before we finish, do you have anything else that you want to say to the wide world audience out there, from 10 to a million people?
Oh, just happy reading and happy writing.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks.